I have two kids. I have
Great.
twins. They're almost 20.
Twins are
Twins that are
hard.
almost
You
20, you said?
what?
Yeah.
I'm like, you're part of the Look Young Club. Welcome to the Sharp Conversations. What we do is we talk to people who are experts in healthcare about physician burnout, about how to make tech better, really about your experiences that you've had and what insights you have.
Well, my name is Rohit Uppal, and I'm the Chief Clinical Officer for TeamHealth Hospital Medicine. I've been with TeamHealth since 2015, and prior to that, I was with Ohio Health in Columbus, Ohio for 14 years. I'm a hospitalist, physician leader. That's basically me.
So I'm particularly interested, Rohit, in your experience as a leader in an organization that staffs many different hospitals, many different settings. I'm sure you have either seen directly or through the people who work with Team Health, many different care settings and what works and what doesn't work. Is there something that you can call out that you feel like, man, this has worked really well at this place? And you can share or not share, you don't have to share the names, but maybe an example of something that has worked really well and something that has worked really not well around burnout initiatives?
For me, probably the biggest factor that helps prevent burnout is when we have alignment between physicians and the health system, the goals of the health system, the voice of physicians and clinicians is involved in decision making, so those clinicians feel heard, and the decisions that are made have their voice included in them. Because the role of being a hospitalist is already, I think, one of the most challenging roles that I know of, within or outside of medicine. There are just so many competing demands, and so to add the politics or conflict or just lack of collaboration within the healthcare team, just that adds just a huge burden. So, when we think about, what kind of environment do we want to create when we partner with a health system, it's really having that alignment where we really feel like um, we as the leaders of our practice and the health system, we speak with one voice.
So how do you get there? Like just hearing about like alignment, that's hard.
It's
And
really hard.
it's hard to make sure people feel heard or even want to hear each other.
Yeah, and I see that as a role of leadership, particularly physician leadership. So as a physician-led organization, making sure that our leaders have the skills, communication skills, conflict management skills, change management skills, and then we have the process to support them. So I think sometimes we expect that alignment to happen organically or by,
Magically.
and it actually takes a lot of work. So we have a process for our leaders that has been very successful, and it starts with the types of meetings we have and how often we have those meetings. So our local leaders are meeting with the hospital executives at least on a monthly basis, and if
Mm-hmm.
there's challenging times, even more often. And
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
we're telling them what we're doing well, where we have challenges and opportunities, but we're also describing the barriers to success and how they can partner or we can partner together to overcome those barriers.
What's your favorite part of the process?
The growth and development of clinicians and particularly clinician leaders is my favorite thing. If I had to pick one.
I'm wondering how often you feel like your group who meets with the hospital leadership is able to identify opportunities for things to improve workflow or improve your ability to reach those goals, like tools, and how often that's actually listened to and acted on.
So I think, the way I think about it is there are things that we can control, and we have to be masters of those things. There's things we can influence, and we really have to have the skill, to really know how we most effectively influence those things. And then there's things that are out of our control, and choosing an EMR is usually out of our control, right? Because that's usually hundreds of millions of dollars kind of decision.
Hmm.
And, a hospitalist group coming to administration and saying, hey, we don't like this EMR and we want you to go switch to this other one, probably not going to get there. Right, so you got to think about, well, what are the things that we do control and what can we influence?
Hmm.
So, for example, within Team Health, we have mini groups on every EMR, and so we actually have groups of leaders from different practices who are EMR experts at their local site, and they come together and say, "Hey, we're all on Cerner. What resources can we put together so that all of our hospitalist practices who are on Cerner know the best way to leverage what's available to them?" Um,
That's so great.
yeah, so then we do that with each of the major EMRs.
I'm curious in your experience with Team Health over the pandemic time. You must have had this macro level view of how the pandemic was affecting dozens and dozens of different hospitalist groups. I have a micro view in my one hospitalist group within, Penn Medicine. It was really hard. And I found it seemed like, again, everyone was recreating the wheel about how to address the unique challenges that we were being faced with for the first time, um, which of course led to a lot of burnout. So I'd love to just, if there are any things that you think would be high level learnings or things that that stand out for you as, man, when I look back at the last 2 years, this really worked well as we managed things.
Well, my favorite thing, if I could say that, about the early part of the pandemic was that I think what we do as hospitalists every day is heroic. But those things are normally taken for granted. Um, and maybe even the specialty of possible medicine to some extent was taken for granted. But the pandemic made it so clear to everybody that wow, our healthcare system is deeply dependent on these clinicians that call themselves hospitalists, and these are people who stepped up at a time when no one could guarantee their safety, and they came in the hospital, took care of patients, and the first thing I remember, besides the fear and uncertainty, like the first really discrete thing that became a challenge is, hey, we don't have enough PPE to protect ourselves, right? And to think that that would be the challenge that we would be dealing with.
Yeah.
And the beauty of that, though, is it's such an easy challenge to fix. Um, and so what we did as an organization, we have a great supply chain that really had nothing else to do at the time, right? Because so many of our other processes were put on hold. We focused completely on acquiring and delivering PPE
Hmm.
to all of our hospitalists. So we
That's
shipped,
amazing.
yeah, pallets of PPE. We have pictures of our hospitalists, our nurses in our facilities wearing PPE that we shipped there.
Hmm.
Uh, that was just such a rewarding thing because I think so I think recognizing the heroism of what we do. Um, the second piece was, and I think this almost happened universally, is every healthcare executive had to say, you know, we have to put our financial goals um, aside, and we got to figure out how do we take care of our patients, our communities, and our clinicians.
Hmm.
And again, we saw that across the board, where we're in an industry where the financial pressures are so acute that it drives some executives to be very focused on financial outcomes, and we rarely heard about finances during that time period.
Hmm.
We meet with executives
It's
and say,
like a
hey,
utopia.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
How do you take that energy, like, and bring it forward? When there's an emergency, people sometimes, it sounds like in your circumstance, are good at focusing on what matters. But how do you do that when your life doesn't or does return to normal?
gosh, I wish somehow I knew the answer to that, how we could
Yeah.
bottle it up.
I was like, I have a
Yeah.
real question.
It feels like everything went back to pre-COVID in the snap of a finger,
Mm.
and part of that is within hospitals, um, pressures are more acute than ever. The nursing shortages, and the amount that hospitals are paying for nursing staff, inflation, so increasing prices, and at the same time, some of the financial support that we were getting during COVID that was going straight to hospitals has
Right.
ended. So so now there's we're back to, hey, what's our length of stay, and how are you going to get it to goal, and and
Right.
I don't blame a hospital executive. I mean, that's just, at this point, it's survival,
It's a
right?
reality. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mistakes happen all the time, right? Mistakes happen, miscommunications, mistakes, they happen frequently. I think a lot of them are under recognized even, let alone under reported. But what is your opinion on how mistakes are related to burnout for clinicians?
Well, I mentioned earlier, I think the job of a hospitalist is so challenging already, but I think we make it a lot harder often because we don't have good teamwork and collaboration between all the different disciplines that have to work together to care for a patient. The mistakes that are made culturally are around collaboration, because when what we hope to always build is teamwork between the hospitalist, the case managers, the nurses, the therapist. When all of that works together, it makes everyone's life better. You're going to have better nursing retention, better staff retention. The hospitalists are going to be happier. But it takes a lot of work to get there. It takes a lot of commitment from the hospitalist side and the hospital side to get there, and it takes leadership. So that's kind of the cultural side of it. When clinicians make medical mistakes, I think that's uh, it's catastrophic. We've all been there, where we've done something, made a clinical judgment, and it was wrong, and that plagues you for so long, and it causes so much shame, right? Because we all train to be perfect,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just an unobtainable um, goal to achieve. So we're going to make mistakes.
What do you tell people when they come to you with that, like as a
Well,
leader?
hopefully they come to you, because I think the biggest mistake we make is we deal with it on our own because we have too much shame to share that with somebody. And I think the act of coming to somebody and saying, "Hey, I made this mistake and I want to talk about it," um, removing the stigma of that conversation is the most important thing we can do, because um, when you get to talk to somebody about it, you realize that, again, everyone's made these mistakes. It usually is not as bad as you thought. Um, and just hearing that someone else has gone through that is incredibly supportive, and just
Definitely.
that it's almost like stages of grief you go through, and you just accelerate your movement through that. So a lot of malpractice cases are the same way. Um, a lot of clinicians have a lot of shame around malpractice, and we actually, one of the first things we did as part of our wellness program, this was probably even before I joined TeamHealth, we did this, is we have a litigation support team.
Hmm.
So anytime any of our hospitals are in a malpractice case, they're partnered with another hospitalist who's a volunteer who has been through a malpractice case. And
Wow.
that person's sole role is not to get into the details of the case or help prepare you to defend the case. It's all about, how is this, what is this doing to your wellness? How are you feeling about it? How can I help you process it?
I think that's
That actually gave me
awesome.
goosebumps
No, the whole
because
thing, I've been like taking notes. I'm like, tell me this.
but really, I mean, I think the stress of the liability that we take on as clinicians, the lack of ability to have a say in the tools that we use, which have a direct effect on our ability to care for patients and make educated, good decisions, it's extremely stressful. And I have multiple colleagues who, after having a case come up against them or that they were involved in, stopped practicing because they were like, it was just so traumatizing. They were like, I just can't do this. And I think that um, this program that you're talking about, where people can at least just be that emotional support for a colleague, is such a great idea.
I think
That's
it's
my
also
favorite take home. You said a lot of things that I think are really great take homes, but I think that's a really,
Yeah.
really actionable, great one.
I think my takeaway was the biggest mistake you make is to not share it. to like hide it in shame, which is
Yeah.
it applies to a lot of life.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think until COVID, clinician wellness was a term that was out there, and there were kind of fringe groups like you,
No, I
working.
knew that too. And I
Yeah,
predicted it. I was like, guess what, guys? This is going to be
yeah.
the next big thing. And people are like, whatever. I'm like, it will.
This has got to be part of the strategic plan for every healthcare organization. Is how are we going to commit resources to clinician wellness? How are we going to measure it? How are we going to create action plans behind the results of those measurements? And how are we going to hold ourselves accountable? Um, it, it's it's easy to ignore because it has a long-term impact, and it's
Yeah.
easy to focus on those short-term things. But if we don't do this well, um, all the goals that we hold important, um, clinically, operationally, financially, we're not going to be able to reach those goals because it's such a big issue right now. We're seeing record numbers of retirements across
Yes.
medicine, right? Um, I was reading in the match for emergency medicine for the first time, something like 200 positions went unfilled in the first
Wow.
match, and that's never happened before.
Yeah.
We had, anecdotally, we had a couple of stories of residents that we had hired to start, right? So they were residents, and even before they started, they notified us that they had chosen to pursue a different career. So
Oh,
whatever
wow.
they'd had in their clinical time as a resident, they decided they didn't want to practice, this career that they've spent hundreds of thousands
Dedicated their whole life.
Right.
of dollars.
And I like the framework that you said, which is coupling the talking with action, saying you need to actually put things into place to make change and not just talk about the need for change.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for being part of our chat
Yeah,
and
thank you.
for sharing the leadership ideas I wrote on my pad and I'm going to use. So I think
Thank you.
everyone will be able to use them.
It's amazing to know that people are out there working on this. Yeah, we have a lot of work to do.
Yes.
Great.
Thanks.